when I decided to switch, I switched over to photography and I completed the degree because I just refused to quit. But I really thought I'd get nothing from it. I just didn't want to say I quit. Instead, I stayed persistent, and that degree has helped me more than I ever dreamt.
The following is a long open conversation with Juliana Roth Narayan, Director of the Executive MBA at the Asia School of Business in collaboration with MIT Sloan School of Management. We got a chance to sit and talk about many topics, like her journey from the Americas to the Asia region, her involvement in the leadership courses and the upbringing of the young and the experience, and her current and future work in Malaysia and beyond. This is On the Long with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to contribute to the channel on the description below. And now with y'all, Juliana Roth Narayan.
Bintang?
Bokeh Bintang.
So,
It's fine.
but I can look at you when we talk, or do I have to look here?
Usually you can look here.
Beautiful.
Right here. That will be the
Beautiful.
the key. And I believe we can start in. Wait a second. Let me put this. On.
You need a little remote quicker.
Oh yeah. Sometimes that will be better. I guess we can start in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of On the Long with FVR. Today we have Juliana. Thanks for doing this.
Hi, nice to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you for inviting me.
So it has been a long way coming, but we finally got a chance to talk. And some people may say, wait a second. I heard about this woman before. Every time you are applying for an MBA. So people may ask, okay, what is the background of this person? So I need to ask you, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Certainly. So I come from the United States, from Atlanta. I actually went through Emory University as an undergrad, liked it so much that when I started a career in business, I decided I didn't like that so much, and I went back to the university, and I've worked for Gusweta Business School for almost 20 years, and now I've transitioned to here, to Malaysia, to continue working with students.
That's impressive. Now, given that you have this background, people may say, wait a second, Atlanta is kind of big, right? But in which part in particular you were?
Okay. I was in Atlanta, I was in Decatur.
Okay. That's good to know.
So it's in the city of Atlanta, just a little bit to the east.
Oh, that's very cool. So now, given that point of view, how was the early years of Juliana? How was your childhood? How was the world growing up? And what made you say, I want to go to this career?
Certainly. Okay. So my world growing up was a little bit naive. I grew up in Atlanta on the outskirts and the suburbs, went through traditional schools just like everybody else. And then when I was probably around 17, my dad took a transfer to Chicago. I had been sick in high school, so he said, sorry, you don't have an option, you must move with the family. So I moved with the family to Chicago, and then I realized the world was much bigger than Atlanta. So I spent a little bit of time in Chicago, and then spent some time, I did a study abroad in the UK, spent some time in Thailand, then came back to Atlanta to Emory to finish my degree.
You mentioned UK and you mentioned Thailand. Which parts of those places? Because UK happens to be like very centric in London, but then it's quite diverse.
It is indeed. So this was quite a few years back. I was based in Canterbury. And I fell in love with the UK. My only goal was to get back to the UK, and then I discovered Asia.
Okay.
And I still love the UK, but I think I fell in love with Southeast Asia just a little bit more, and so this became the ultimate goal to come back to.
So after your station in UK, you went to Thailand.
So
Right?
that was because my dad got transferred. So my dad was with GE. So he took a transfer to Thailand. I had just started undergrad. I was like, okay, great, I'll go for a little bit and then I'll come back to the US. And I did go to Thailand. I loved it, except I couldn't get into a single school there.
Okay.
Because my Thai obviously wasn't fluent. So not being able to get into school there, I came back to the US to finish school.
Now, given that predicament that you couldn't study in Thailand, but you went to the US, also knowing that a lot of people have to do the standardized test in order to enter,
how was your options to say, well, now that we don't have this, now I have to go this other path?
So, well, I think it's different, okay? So, the issue with Thailand, okay, Thailand has a great educational system.
Okay.
At the time that I was there in the 90s, the problem is that the best school in the country, the equivalent of Harvard in the country, Chulalongkorn, taught in English.
Okay.
And I didn't speak Thai.
Okay.
So, this is someone who's trying to go into the very best that Thailand has to offer. And it's incredibly competitive to get in there and very limited number of slots. So I 100% get why Chulalongkorn was not interested in accepting me as a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I went back to the U.S.
Understood.
Yeah.
That gives more clarification. Now, Emory.
So Emory, I ended up at Emory because of I had a grandfather that was in his 80s, and regrettably my grandfather lost his girlfriend of 11 years and 2 brothers in a span of 6 months. So when I knew I wasn't going to be able to study in Thailand, my dad wanted me to go back to Atlanta because that's where we had family. And his thought pattern was, well, you can be around your grandfather because we didn't have family within 8 hours. And at the same time, my grandfather could take care of me. So we thought it was a win-win. And when I looked at schools, I was very lucky. I called 3 of the schools in the Atlanta area. Emory was very willing to speak with me, and it was a business school that was willing to speak with me. So I transferred in as a junior.
Okay. Yeah, because the typical question is, why Emory when you have the yellow jackets of Georgia Tech?
Okay, well, that requires being good in numbers, which I was not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerhouse in engineering. That's how I happen
Yes.
to know them.
So I was actually a business major. I wasn't an engineer.
Okay.
Yeah, the engineering schools, I couldn't have gotten into the lowest ranked engineering school in our country.
So can you describe us a little more how was your time in Emory?
Oh, Emory was brilliant. Okay, as a student, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I ended up with a very close group knit of friends. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, you go in and you're looking for business skills to change your life and to pursue your career. And you're also looking to build a good network. Okay, and I ended up with great friends that lasted a lifetime from Emory. Super lucky. And what amazed me more was also the professors as well. So I was able to build very close relationships with the faculty. And in fact, it's the faculty is why I came to work at Emory, because I will never forget having a conversation with one of my favorite faculty, and I'm like, I really don't like corporate. If this is what I have to look forward to, I have to figure out something new. And then the very next day, I had a phone call from one of the departments there saying, we're looking for someone, would you like to interview? And it was because the faculty had mentioned to someone. Because business schools are very small. Everyone thinks that the universities are huge, but in the business school, everybody knows everybody. And the same with ASB. We all know each other. When we get in, we get to know all the different departments. And a lot of it is just communication.
Yeah, it's true, because it's about who do you know and if you are able to work with in order to create the output that is needed.
Yeah.
Now, a little question that comes from somebody who has been also living in the South, in Texas to be more particular.
Great location, by the way.
Absolutely. How was your feelings when you were in Atlanta and then you had to go to Chicago, which is in the north?
So, mind you, I was 17. Okay, so I was quite young at the time. I like adventure. Okay, so I wasn't keen to move to Chicago instantly, but once I got into Chicago, wow, I love Chicago. Chicago is huge. And compared to Atlanta, I think Atlanta at the time was, and this is again, we were many years ago, right? So Atlanta at the time was a really great regional city. There's a big difference between a regional city and a truly global international city. So for me, it was incredibly eye-opening because that's where I began to see the world. So prior, when I lived in Atlanta, I'd actually, the first time, before I moved to Chicago, right? I wasn't really that aware of anything outside of the U.S. Moved to Chicago at 17, got global exposure, and then when I came back to Emory, I came back with a different lens.
Now, with that lens that you built in Emory, how was your first steps into your career? Because you got a degree and then you were like, okay, where do we go from here?
That was exactly. So I always coach students. I'm like, look, even if you know 100% where you want to go, you could change your mind halfway through, right? So don't close any doors at this point, keep all doors open. And that's what happened to me. I went through, I focused in on marketing. I knew I wanted to be a marketer. And then I got into the corporate world and it was different than what I expected. The job, the company, they were great. Okay, there's no complaints whatsoever on them. I just didn't like what I was doing. I'm a people person. I like anything that engages people. I think this is how my entire career I've been in student services. And Emory once again gave me that amazing opportunity because they gave me an opportunity to come back. So I started in the non-degreed executive education, and then after some more schooling, then I moved into the program offices.
Given that opportunity that Emory had to keep the doors open, how was that a small transition from the non-degree towards the other one?
So everything became a bit blurred. So the reason I say that is because once I left the non-degreed, I actually took a 2.5-year break.
Okay.
And I was back in Thailand.
Ah.
So I spent 2.5 years back in Thailand with my family again, because my dad originally thought it would be for 1 year and he thought he was going to retire. But I was lucky that he ended up extending his contract, and I got to extend as well. I wasn't working for pay because I still didn't have the qualifications to qualify for the work permit. But I got to explore a lot of areas. And in fact, actually, it was that 2.5-year exploration that made me who I am today. So I got very much into graphic design, very much into photography, and was able to apply skills and learn skills and have the opportunity to take classes and learn in depth.
Now, can you describe a little more how was your exploration in Thailand?
So I think the reason I say that is I was very blessed to be given the opportunity of not being forced to work, right? So because I had time on my hands, I was able to work with friends, and they were in a startup, so I wasn't working for pay, but I was able to get my hands dirty and learn something about web design, learn something. They were both photographers, so I had a chance to learn under two photographers. I had a chance to explore and learn new avenues. And then also with one of the women's clubs, I had the opportunity to volunteer and do freelance in a magazine, which was part of the club.
Photography. Do you mind if we discuss a little more about photography?
Sure.
Because when we mention about photography, it's like, oh, everybody can do it with the phone. But it requires a certain skill to put, okay, this is the angle, this is the light, or when you have a professional camera, the quality of the lens. Maybe I am on the right track, but can you tell us what is photography per se?
So for me, the reason I love photography is I love art. Okay, so there is the practical side of photography, which is a lot of the commercial photography. There is the artistic side of photography, which is the pieces I fell in love with. I fell in love with all the alternative methods of doing stuff, alternative printing and things of that like. So I went back to school. So when I moved back to Atlanta, okay, I went to work. I was lucky. I decided to go into a design school because I decided, okay, I'm going to be a designer now. And that part was great for the first semester. Okay, and I refused to quit at anything. Okay, and sometimes that's to my detriment. So what I found is when I went in to be a designer, photography was my passion, and design was where I thought I was going to make my career. And all of my classmates were here, and I was here. I can copy anything, but I wasn't as good at the creative expression and design. And the problem is that when you go out into the work world, you're competing against everyone else that's here, so if you're here, you're always the last one. So I realized by term 3 I would never be a graphic designer. I can copy anything, but I would never be a designer because I wasn't creative enough. And then I just shifted. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to drop out of a program. I really want to learn the computer design aspect of it and all the Adobe products. And I'm just going to zero in and focus in on my hobby of photography. And I finished the program and did photography. But photography, I always knew that photography would be what I do when I retire. It will be what I do for fun. Photography would never be my full career. But in fact, the skills that I learned from design school, which surprised me the most, because I expected from design school to learn the creativity piece of it, right? What design school taught me that I was able to take away from is because you get so many projects on deadline that come up last minute, so you have a very little window to do something that's just unbelievably large, okay? And it's designed so that sometimes you just don't sleep for days because you have to be able to turn something fast. And that's what taught me not to panic. The first semester I panicked when I got all of this stuff that had to be done, and then you got very little time between when they released you to actually execute an execution. it was tough. And for me, the biggest takeaway that I took away was now when anything comes to me, I don't panic. So regardless of how big it is, I might not know how I'm going to get to the end, but I will know how to chip away to work my way there until I can find the path to get to the end.
That's
And
a
that
powerful
was huge.
statement.
To me, that made the whole program, the entire program, worth its weight in gold plus. And then, of course, the photography skills I picked up were outstanding. And I still remember knowing that I achieved the goal toward perfection. Not that I'm a perfect photographer, I'm far from, okay? But what I call the goal to perfection is the very first few semesters, I'm panicking, I'm getting stuff done at the last minute just because of the way the timing works. By the time I got into the last semesters, I was done 2 days early. And you're like, okay, I've learned. And the time save wasn't the technical piece, the time save was I didn't panic anymore.
That's something that can be translated to any other kind of business. And it's truly remarkable because how many times we hear, oh, some people should panic or some people should be aware. It's like, once you know how to do it, then it becomes easier. Once you realize, okay, I know how to start and I know which to pick the phone to say, help me to finish this, then the journey becomes easier. So I'm also surprised to learn something about this that I didn't expect, but it's why surprising. Now, given that you studied this art and got this degree, once you walked with your diploma, how was your next mission?
Next mission was amazing because I was still at Emory. So when I came back to Atlanta from Thailand, Emory hired me back immediately. I was lucky. I was only in country 2 weeks before a professor reached out and said he wanted me to work with him. Okay? And so I was already working for Emory part-time with a professor because I was going to school. And then as soon as I graduated, I spoke around to our senior associate dean, and he's like, look, we've got some roles coming open. I want you to look at them. So that's how I actually went into the program offices. And I started in our evening MBA program office. And I stayed there for 3 years. Loved every minute of it. It was great. So prior to that, I really was not an expert in careers. The job taught me how to be an expert in academic requirements and regulation. And it taught me about not many careers, but the key ones. Because we had to learn how to get in. Through academic coaching, you also help students with careers. So even though I'm not someone that places you in careers, I had to learn the skills that it took to get into banking. I had to learn the skills that it took to get into consulting because at the time those were the two most in-demand skills. So learning those career paths opened a lot to be able to coach students because students also come in with very distinct, clear goals of what they want to achieve. So my goal was to academically coach them, to help them, to help show them what student clubs they could get into, how they could make their resume look more attractive when the companies come to hire. Because at the end of the day, you want to look the best, right? It's natural. Every student does. No one wastes their time coming to business school just for the sake of it, okay? And so it gave me 3 years there. But then I still had this piece of that background of the graphic design piece with understanding all the computer graphics. We have a modular MBA program we had at the time, and the person running it left. And they tapped me for the opportunity because they knew I would be able to help the faculty put all the lectures online.
Wow.
And so that degree actually ended up paying off again because it helped me in that role.
So your degree already paid twice in that span.
And it was a degree that I never expected to pay. When I gave up graphic design because I was terrible at it, at that point I just figured I'm completing a degree because I'm not going to quit. But I really thought that degree would do nothing for me for the rest of my life.
Can you say that again?
So when I decided to switch, I switched over to photography and I completed the degree because I just refused to quit. But I really thought I'd get nothing from it. I just didn't want to say I quit. Instead, I stayed persistent, and that degree has helped me more than I ever dreamt.
When you say that, it reminds me of Michael Economides, who was the late husband of my commander, Christine Economides. He used to say to his PhDs, because when he was teaching petroleum engineering and hydraulic fracturing, a lot of equations, he always say, do not quit. Do not quit in your PhD. Do not quit in your degree. Get the job done. And when you say that, it was like, look at that. After so many years, I began to hear that again. And it's true. When you don't quit, when you finish the job, all of a sudden, that pays off. not once and twice so far in your statement. And when you were dealing with the evening MBAs, this is a very naive question. Which is the difference between the evening MBAs and the other ones?
Okay, so there's three groups of MBAs that I've worked with. So the first one is the evening MBAs. So the evening MBAs look just like full-time students, but they still have the job. So they do the program in the evening. Some schools it's on the weekend, but they're sitting on the same level of work experience as a full-time program. They usually want the same goals as a full-time student. They just happen to have a good enough job that they're not ready to give up the opportunity cost. And so I would say the evening MBAs look just like the full-timers, except they have less time. And then you've got the executive MBAs, and the executive MBAs are sitting on 8 years plus work experience. Again, I think all MBA students come back. You may have different reasons for why you come back, but the goals are to gain the knowledge and still to get ahead, however you define ahead, right? Whether it's to change careers. Usually when you hit the EMBAs, you're less likely to change careers, you're more likely to change employers or change function areas. But you're not going to do a 180 and do something completely radical. It'll build on what you've done. When you're in the evening program or a full-time MBA program, then you have the privilege, because you're only, 5 to 8 years into your career, you can still radically change paths if you want to. So some people come to get ahead and accelerate. Some people come for a completely different career path.
Yeah, that's very clarifying, because some people will say, wait a second, those are evening MBAs. Are they hanging out with owls or things like that? And it's like, it's a different description. Now, you spent how many years in Emory?
So I was there officially 19.
Wow. So what else happened in between?
So after I left Emory, the only reason I came here was because of the opportunity to come back to Asia. So I think I was very fortunate. I had an amazing job working for a fantastic manager whom I really respected. There was nothing about my role to make me want to leave Emory, right? Because a lot of times you'll hit a frustration point and you're like, that's it, I'm done, honey. Okay, I was in a very good situation. But the reason that I ended up looking to come to Asia was because Asia just was in my soul. When I got to a certain point, it was a pivotal moment in my life when I was in Bangkok. And I realized that Thailand is not the same as Malaysia, it's not the same as Hong Kong, it's not the same as Singapore. But the values registered and became part of my soul. So for me, the call to come back to Asia was very personal. And I wanted to come back to Asia. And I still remember having a conversation with Professor Kazanjian, and literally I was leading a group of executive MBAs to Asia. And there were 2 boarding calls. So there was one to Bangkok, and then a half hour later there was one to the U.S. And I cried that I was on the wrong plane. And don't get me wrong, I'm proud of my country. I love the U.S., right? But my heart wanted to be in Asia. So he and I had a nice conversation, and he said, look, Emory's probably not going to Asia anytime soon. You have to follow your heart. And so with that, I started looking for the right opportunity. And honestly, I was looking for a couple of years, but I had the privilege to be picky because it wasn't like I had to leave Emory. And it was by accident. So your network is everything. And literally how I discovered ASB was because I was good friends with a lot of people from Coca-Cola. And one of my alums from the class of '09, D.V. Darshan, an amazing man, would stop by and we would talk frequently. And we became good friends, right? And he's like, why Asia? Jules, why Asia? And I'm like, because it's the value system. And he's like, okay, I'm Indian. I get it. I know exactly what you're saying about the value system. Give me your resume. So I gave him my resume, and I never thought anything would happen about it. He passed it to a friend of his that was a very good friend. He turned out to be based in Eclipse.
Oh, really?
And he passed it on to Charlie. So Charlie passed it to Sean, and all of a sudden, in my inbox one day, I had this message that says, hi, I'm Sean Ferguson. I'm at a school called Asia School of Business. We'd like to talk with you further. Went online to find out what Asia School of Business was. It was like in collaboration with MIT. I'm very intrigued. I spoke with Sean, had a great hour conversation with Sean. I had a good, at least hour-long conversation with Charlie. And then I had several conversations, probably 4 or 5 more phone calls with ASB members. All of us were in alignment. So they said, come up to Boston. So I came up to Boston. I met the members of the MBA program team that were there. I met the members of ASB that were there. And at the end, they said, okay, you'll hear from us. I was optimistic I would hear from them because it was a really good interaction. I even told my poor manager, said, thank you for giving me the time to go interview at a school called Asia School of Business. And by the way, Ram, if I get offered the job, I'm taking it. And I was lucky I had a supportive manager that was completely supportive of me and helping me grow.
That's such a fantastic story because this reminds me like when you're building, you want to help others to build so they can build more and more. And it's really remarkable that they give you the chance to go to Boston. When you mentioned that, I have to go back to the episode with Rod Garcia, you may see it right there. He mentioned that he was in the University of Chicago, and then in 1984, and then he actually took the plane to go to Boston, just to hear what was going on, and then do the interviews, and then the rest is history. He spent like 30 years something in MIT, but of course that was another time because there was no email, there was no such a thing. Everything was very analog. But here, right now, we are talking about hey, it's the 2010s. There was email, there was all these tools. So when you discuss with them that there was the opportunity to go to Malaysia, what come to your mind?
For me, it was Asia. I mean, every country is completely different, okay? Like in the States, there's similarities between the states, right? They're different, but there's similarities. And I had been to Malaysia before, so I knew that it was completely different than Thailand. But to be very honest with you, when I first started talking with them, what came to mind is I can actually be good in the role because I understand enough about American business schools. And this is still based on a lot, I don't know Sloan, but I understand enough that I can adapt. So for me, I didn't want to risk taking a job that I didn't think I could be good at. So I thought, okay, I can be good at this role. And then, courtesy of Air Asia, Bangkok's 2 hours away. So absolute worst case scenario. I'm only 2 hours to Bangkok. I can be there every weekend, right? I still have a great group of friends there. But then, of course, so I accepted the job with the contract, I signed the contract, even before I came back to see Malaysia. And when I first saw Malaysia, I was quite young, and I remember very little about it. Like, people laugh at me. I literally remember that it was very lush and green. It had amazing cultural stuff, and that there were monkeys. That was literally what I remembered about Malaysia.
Many years ago.
Many years ago. And then when I landed in Malaysia, because they let me come over to pick out a house, right? When I landed in Malaysia, instantly, I mean, it took less than 2 hours to fall in love with Malaysia. I mean, the people are amazing. The greenery here is just outstanding. The food, oh my word. If you tell me you can't eat in Malaysia, I don't think you can eat anywhere in the globe. I mean, the culture here is just, I am so in love with Malaysia.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like I won the lottery by being given this opportunity.
Oh yeah. And of course, we have all the stories of people that what happened when they win the lottery, and you were still building. You were still building because you came here and you began to help. What is EMBAs?
So
It
here,
used to be called the WPs, right?
well, here actually I was quite blessed because I was given quite a few opportunities. So I came and started in the MBA program, and then they hired me. I even told Charlie back in Boston, I said, look, Charlie, I've spent my entire career with students at work. So if you need someone that's full-time to run the full-time MBA, I'm not your person because there's better qualified people. But if you want someone to run a professional MBA, that's my strength. And he said, that's what I'm hiring for. So you learn the school from the MBA program, and then we will build. And so when they first went, there was actually debate within the school whether to launch an executive MBA or to launch a working professional. We launched the working professional because of the fact that we didn't know about the 8 years demand, right? We didn't know if the demand was more for younger people or if it was more for more senior people. So we tried to do a WP so that 5 years work experience and above would work. The reason that we shifted to an EMBA was twofold. One is, I mean, we got an amazing group of students in the WP program. Okay, and 90% of the students had the exact same goals as an EMBA program, but 10% had the goals of a full-time program. And we weren't good enough to be able to deliver both systems and both goals. So we wanted to make certain, the worst thing you can do is come to an MBA program and regret your decision. So we wanted to make certain that we had the paths that were correct for each person, right? So the MBA full-time, there is a path. We know what we can deliver. We know that we can deliver excellently. With the exec MBA program, the needs are just different. Okay, it doesn't mean that one is better or worse than the other. It just means you have different needs. So what I focus on in the exec MBA program is slightly different than what we focus on the full-time program. So the reason to shift it was just because most of our students came in with 12 years work experience. So we wanted to make certain that what we were delivering was targeted toward a majority of the students. And so by shifting it to EMBA, truthfully, the name change doesn't matter. The program, how we delivered it, whether it was more on weekends or more during the weekday, okay, that changed. But the real reason we changed the title of it is because EMBA is more industry standard, and working professionals are not industry standard. Okay? So it was about putting a name out there that people recognize.
1000% supporting that, because also coming from another background, when I hear the WPs and it's like, wait a second, isn't that the EMBAs? Isn't that executive MBAs? Or is this the part-time professionals? What are we talking? Because when you talk with other people in other programs, and it's like, okay, you need at least some consistency.
Yeah.
And that was a consistency that I remember it was Jake Cohen who began to say, and now we are discussing about somebody who is not here, but who was here for almost a year. I need to ask you.
Jake Cohen is amazing. He's still a mentor I look up to tremendously.
So, how was your interaction and your time with him?
Oh, I'm so thankful for the time with Jake. In fact, in addition to the 9 months that he spent as our leader here, I was also lucky because he's been running the student journey from afar. So I get to have bi-weekly calls with Jake. And what makes that remarkable is I had spent several years in student services, yes, okay? But there are differences between each school, and there's always ways to learn. So Jake is a senior associate dean of all of the grad programs at Sloan. And Sloan has 10 graduate programs, maybe more, I'm not sure, I haven't counted them up. But so this is someone that's got a plethora of experience across the board. So to be able to have the chance to call someone like Jake and say, can you give advice? Can you offer suggestions? This is what I'm thinking, what do you think? And in addition to that, Jake has opened the door to let us talk to several people in Sloan. So because of him, I'm in touch with my counterpart at the Executive MBA program at Sloan. I'm in touch with all various departments and able to get best practices that we can implement here. And not everything that Sloan does there can work here, because we're our own unique school. But it's nice not to have to reinvent the wheel. If someone else can give you advice on how to do it better, you can be quicker.
It's true. It's like the analogy of, instead of making a new wheel, can you turn up the wheel you already have so it can work as good as the other ones?
Yeah.
And that's really, really dynamic. I remember the time that Jake was here and some people were saying, well, he's not smiling enough. And it's like, because his job is not about smiling, it's about executing, it's about doing. And I'm happy that he also brought not ideas but the execution in his transition time.
Yeah. So when I met Jake, my first meeting with Jake, once he became appointed as our interim dean, I came with PowerPoint deck. I said, Jake, here are all my problems. Help. Here's what I would like to do. Please help, because these are my biggest issues. These are my biggest pain points. This is what is not working in this program. And he said, okay, let's fix it. He didn't say, oh, okay, I won't make the decision. He said, no, let's fix it. And we still, there's no such thing as a perfect program. It doesn't matter what school you go to. Every school I've been exposed to, there are student complaints, there are issues, the students want things differently. But he helped us improve.
Yes, that's true. Now, with your permission, it's time to address a topic that was a little taboo and polemic in the past.
Ooh.
The schedule for the EMBAs. I remember it was so discussed. Jake was also trying to find a way to solve it. And I want to hear from you, how was the solution?
Well, the scheduling, I think the scheduling came about this way. We very much wanted an in-person program. And we wanted to make certain that students have the best opportunity to get all of the MIT faculty. So we would schedule weeks where they could take classes. Now, with the WP program, I think the school scheduled, it was 19 weeks out of work across the span of 20 months. It was just too much. So what we were able to do is we collected feedback. We collected it from the employers. We collected it obviously from the students who gave us the feedback. And even when the students were giving us feedback, at the time we couldn't change it, but we could at least make certain that we took note of it, right? And that is why we changed the schedule the way we did now, of shifting a lot of stuff to the weekends. Because the problem is that time out of work. I mean, they don't want every waking hour out of work. So this is why we shifted it, and we've got still 2 to 3 weeks out of work per semester, because we want to make certain you have full access to the MIT faculty. We also want to make certain you get access to the business practicums, but we moved the rest of the weekends, and we just did an every other weekend format. Now, the downside to that was the international approach, because we very much want to keep this program international. And we haven't achieved it yet, but if I can dream numbers, which dream is the goal, right? But it doesn't mean it's going to be what happens. The dream goal for EMBA would be 70% domestic, 30% international. So the only way to maintain that piece is to have an option for internationals, and it can't be someone flying in every other weekend because it's too costly. And the degree is already expensive. I mean, nothing at ASB is cheap, right? So given that, we figured out a way to do the weekends hybrid, learning on some of what we learned out of COVID. And so the weekends are, you can do in hybrid. You can do either from your house or you can do in person. We hope people will come and do it in person. But if they're not in country, if they don't live in KL, and it's difficult to come in, then by all means, you can do a hybrid as well. And so we require everyone still to come in for the weeks on campus, specifically because we want you to have that in-person opportunity to network, meet your classmates, to learn from the MIT faculty, to learn in person. But we make certain that every week that you're in campus, we can clearly define why there's no other way to do it.
It makes sense, especially because at the beginning, when you have one solution that you've been living with, and then you have to develop another one, frictions will always arise until you finally adapt the new solution. I guess everybody who has been in any system knows about this. And that was one of the most paramount pieces of work that Jake helped build with your help. Because this is another thing. A person cannot do this alone. And I believe you cannot do this alone as well.
Oh, this takes a whole village.
Exactly.
I mean, but anything in life that's substantial is worth doing requires a whole village anyway. Because you could come up with a plan on your own, but it doesn't mean that you've thought through everything. You need every department, every group to help give you insight. And when you share with people, the feedback that you get is invaluable. Might not always be feedback that you want, but the longer you chew and think about it, there's usually a way to incorporate it in.
Now, let's take another angle and let's discuss about how's been your experience in Southeast Asia so far. Because one thing was when you were 17-year-old, and now in this stage of your life,
That's completely different.
What are you seeing different?
Oh my word, well, Asia's changed so much and grown so much. I mean, it's unreal. But for me, this has been phenomenal. I mean, I came back here, well, first of all, I came here single. I met my husband and got married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, I mean, the life journey has changed as well, right? But just coming back, I mean, I had spent the whole time while I was at Emory, I was still coming back to Asia. It's not like I had walked away ever. I was still coming back every other year or so. So I got to see Thailand and Asia as a whole grow because you go to different countries and visit, right? But the experience this time around, I think I know me better. Okay, I know me. So I know exactly what I like, what I don't like. I know what my goals are. I also am more understanding and adaptive. So I would say when I moved back with specific goals, but I came back for a value system. So for me, I'm very much at peace and happy. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. And of course, Asia is very big, and right now we are in Southeast Asia, but there is something also going on in South Asia called India.
Oh, yes.
So, for the people who have not been there, how is that like?
Oh, wow. So India to me is magical because of the fact that every single place you go, each state is totally different. And I haven't seen that much of it, right? But what I have seen, the pieces I've been to are all completely different. They could be their own little places, their own countries. So the vast variety of what's available is tremendous there. And the same with the people and the culture that you interact with. So you know as well as I do from working with our Indian students that they're completely different because of the different regions they come from. Their whole approach to stuff may be different. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute there, and luckily since I've been here, before I came here, I had been to India once for an extended trip. Okay, and since I've been back here, I've probably been to India. I was in India twice, then COVID hit. And then after COVID, I've been to India at least 3 times a year.
That's very good to hear. Yeah. I did some episodes with some friends that are from the south or the north, and it's like every time they talk about, it's like they're talking about a different country, and it's because the country is big itself.
Country is huge. So if you think of this, Malaysia is what, 30 million people? KL, I think, is what, 1.5, if I got my memory correct. I could be wrong. I need to look that up on Google or ask ChatGPT. But India is 1 point, is it now 4 billion? Billion. And so it makes such a huge difference in everything.
Oh yeah, that's true. Like in perspective, Colombia has 40 million. Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, you say has like 1.3 million.
I think when I looked it up, it was like 1.3, 1.5 million.
Okay, and then you multiply by 10, that's Jakarta.
Yes.
So, and then you say, wait a second, as Malaysia or as Colombia, and then you have, wait a second, India. It's a whole ecosystem on its own.
I mean, to me, that was the biggest takeaway from Malaysia, because when I look around Malaysia, right, you hear of all the terrible traffic in KL. All my friends will tell me about how terrible the traffic is. And after Bangkok, I can tell you, not so much, right? And the reason I think that they're able to have the lush greenery as well is because they can save and dedicate the land just because there's less people. At least that's my take on it. It's not based on research. It's just
because you see it.
It's an observation.
Why people want to be angry at Jews? Because she's describing what she sees with her eyes. And also something else. I have seen that you realize you are in Asia when there is always a plant. There is always a plant on the room. And it's like, why there is always a plant? And then you get used to it. Yeah, that's something I realized. Given that you have been exploring and also getting so used to be from one place to another, any tips about traveling?
Ooh, I may not be the right person to ask about traveling. So I absolutely love traveling. My only tip would be, if you have the chance, go. Because my only regrets are the places I didn't go. So when I traveled to South America, I was able to steal a couple days here and there, but there were a couple places I really wish I would have made the effort to go, and I kept saying, oh, I'll get back there. Now it's a lot harder to get back to South America than it was when I lived in Atlanta, right? And so here, I sort of look at any opportunity I have. I want to go, I want to see somewhere new, because even if I saw it 30 years ago, it's totally different today.
Given that you have been visiting these areas, I want to ask you, which are the little differences across these regions?
Oh my word. I don't even know where to begin on that one.
I can give a little hint.
Yeah?
Why here they give you a spoon instead of a knife? I'm still trying to process it. That would be one thing.
Same in Thailand, by the way. You get a fork and a spoon. And I love it. And I don't know why. And in fact, actually, I've been told in Chinese that the knife is rude if you need the knife.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's, don't quote me on that, but I've been told that. I think it's how you interact with the food, right?
Okay.
And that's why in Asia you need to use your chopsticks. So when I first moved to Asia, I learned how to use chopsticks by eating popcorn. And everyone laughs at me, and I know it's silly, right? But it was the only way I learned to get the motor skills right, and then I could go on to bigger things.
Yeah, talking about chopsticks, I need to mention this woman again, Commander Christine, episode 7. When I was working with her, she brought all the team on Friday for one of those Chinese restaurants. And this was how I learned to use chopsticks. She was like, order anything you want, as many times as you want, with one condition, chopsticks. And somebody who never used chopsticks before is like, is this a trap? What do you mean? And it's because, of course, there was the Fish Friday special or all the things, but it was a way to get used to. And then I began to realize it's a way to get into the culture and also to talk with other people. You're going to have chances to meet clients and you're going to be exposed to different food. It's like a way to learn how to move around the table, but in another level.
Yeah, so I have a dear friend from Hong Kong that always laughs at me for this, okay? What I discovered when I went to China is the food is just incredible and it's nothing like the American Chinese, right? The real Chinese food is just, wow, insane. And then my friends laughed at me because the Americans always give the fortune cookie afterwards. And I was looking forward to the fortune cookie. They never showed up.
Yeah, that happens. That happens all the time. Yeah. Or the other one, you are in an American Chinese restaurant when they give you the orange chicken.
Yes.
There is no orange chicken! There is no orange chicken. Yeah, that's right. And I was happy to be aware of that thing when I went on to one of those Chinese restaurants. And it was like, there is no orange chicken. There is no... And I was using the chopsticks. And some people were like, how do you know about using chopsticks? I tell my story, how I learned, and it was like, yeah, it makes sense. But surprisingly enough, I'm watching this a little more often than not. Some younger Chinese are not using the chopsticks.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I remember I was hanging out with somebody just to eat something in one of those traditional places, and she was like, I never get used to use the chopsticks. I was like, there's always a first time.
I love chopsticks. Even at home, if it's just me, if I'm eating Asian food, 90% of the time I'll grab the chopsticks. But because there's so much you can do with chopsticks, you can control. Even if you eat a salad, you can pick up the leaf, the piece of cabbage, the tomato that you want. You can be picky with the chopstick.
Yeah.
But the one thing, though, that I wanted to tell you that I did notice that I love is the Asians finish meals with fruit often. And that is one thing I picked up that I still absolutely is my favorite thing to do is to finish with fruit. And it's very much Chinese, but Thai also does that a lot. And in Malaysia, I've often eaten fruit too.
Yeah, it's true. I realize that more and more often. Now that we are discussing about difference in the regions and also difference in food, I heard this rumor.
Yep.
I want to test this with you. I heard that the best Chinese food outside China you can find in Singapore. And the best Indian food outside India can be found in Malaysia.
So I don't know if that rumor is true, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it at all because the population, the Indians that live here are the Tamil Indians. And the food is just outstanding. And every time I speak with the local Malaysians who happen to be of Indian background, I'm always like, okay, how long have you been here? How long has your family been here? Most of them is just the grandfathers that came over. So it's close. It's close enough that they all know where their family came from, right? And so, but the cooking stayed. And it became part of the culture here. So even what I love is when you go down the streets, you can get Malay food, you can get Chinese food, you can get Indian food, super easy. And it all is world-class and tastes incredible.
And I don't want to make a lot of propaganda for Malaysia right now because I didn't receive any sponsorship yet. But, okay, let's assume that you also have certain things like I like my halal food, which is very close to the kosher food for the Jews. You can also find it here easily. Now, the problem is if you're too used to that kind of food, when you go to other place that is not Singapore, because you can also find a lot of halal food in Singapore. For example, Hong Kong, it can be a friction.
So I wonder about that. And the reason I say that is I'm strict vegetarian, okay? And there are a lot of countries, like there are hard to find vegetarian on the surface. But once you, like, I still remember the wonderful concierge at the Hyatt in Shanghai. I told him, I'm like, look, I don't do broth, I don't do meat, I have all these restrictions. And so he got a piece of paper and he wrote it out in Chinese for me in Mandarin. And every time, no matter where I was, and I went to some really remote places in China, and I showed the piece of paper, and I always got an incredibly delicious meal that I could eat.
Oh, that's good.
It was an issue of, I may not be able to communicate. My Mandarin is non-existent. So I needed help, and he helped me. But people were generous. They want to help. They want to go out of your way. Like,
Exactly.
and in Malaysia as well. Sometimes, as soon as they realize, well, you're really pure veg, they figure out a way to help you, and they come up with something fantastic, and they'll cook it in the back that's not on the menu. Thailand does the same. So I think a lot of times it's if you can communicate. But what I love about Asia is they'll go out of their way to really cook, because we cook from scratch here. And because people cook from scratch, they're willing to help you.
That's right, because the instruments are there, the materials are there, and it's when they see you, it's like, oh, this might look like a beautiful bird, a lost bird that needs some meal to fly away, or it's a customer. Okay, customer means money. Yeah, maybe that customer will come back. We don't know, and that's why they decide, okay, let's keep this running.
I think that's part of what I love. In the U.S., you can find mom and pop restaurants that will cook off menu for you, right? But if you go into most of the mainstream restaurants, it's on the menu or it's not. You can get something removed, but that's about it. So there are actually a list of restaurants in the U.S. I can't eat at. In Malaysia, I tell them what my limitations are, and honestly, I think I can eat at every single restaurant I found, unless it's a pure meat place.
Yes, and that's another thing. To find a very pure meat place, you need to go to one of those fancy malls. And even to go there, you have to face the traffic and the parking. So it's still a stretch, even from the other point
But
of
even
view.
in Malaysia, the traffic and the parking aren't so bad. What I don't understand about Malaysia is Malaysia has so much, and yet the tourism is nothing compared to other countries surrounding. So imagine Singapore gets tremendous more tourism. For sure, Thailand gets more tourism. And yet Malaysia, I think, is the best kept secret. The prices are lower.
Exactly.
You still get the incredible beaches. You get incredible people, amazing food. You still get tremendous shopping and much lower prices. I don't understand why more people don't come here to visit.
So number one, either this
Oh,
is
excuse me. Do we
go
want to
ahead.
keep them out? In which case, it's most highest prices in the world. Don't bother.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's a good point. Let's analyze as a stock.
Yeah.
When you hear everybody's buying a stock, then that stock becomes overvalued. And for some reason, nobody wants to talk about Malaysia too much. It's like an undervalued stock that has a
Yes.
lot of value, a lot of potential. Now, given that analogy, the other point that I can counter, because this is the thesis I want to test, it's very lazy to say Malaysia is a Muslim country. It's like, Indonesia is also a Muslim country. So, why?
But Malaysia has so many different religions as well, and
Exactly.
they recognize them all.
Exactly. So once you overcome that piece of evidence, then you have to test your hypothesis again, saying, is Malaysia a place you can find a lot of value for your pocket? The answer is yes, because it has infrastructure.
Oh, the infrastructure here is incredible. To be very honest with you, where I realized that I might be in a developing country as opposed to a developed country is, let's say the list of rules isn't as long as in other places. There's still rules. Things are very orderly, but on the other hand, you don't feel like you're suffocated because the rules are too heavy. But the infrastructure, everything here is very much first world.
And then the third point of evidence to keep testing that hypothesis is, oh, it's too hot, and it's like the humidity, or I don't understand the language. Here you can talk English, no problem. And the humidity, well, that's something that is a personal taste.
I was going to say, that's part of why I love Southeast Asia is because I come here and I'm not cold. I hate being cold.
Oh
So
yeah.
I love the fact that I can go to dinner I can leave the restaurant in the evening and it is still nice and warm. I walk home from work and I'm not cold. I wake up in the morning, it's cooler but not cold.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
I remember those days at winter that everybody's checking the phone or hearing the radio for the weather forecast, and it's like, is it gonna snow? Is it gonna be like an ice warming or things like that?
But if you want the cold, we're 8 hours from Sydney? Really easy to hop a plane. We are 4 hours from Japan. I forget how, maybe it's 6 hours. I forget what the
Or
distance
even
is.
Taiwan if you want to be a little chillier.
Yeah, a little chilly. But my point is, if you want winter, you can find winter. You can find winter really fast. You can even find winter depending on the season. You can go to Australia, you can go to Japan. But if you want comfort year round, you can stay in Malaysia.
That's right. And then one additional hypothesis is, one additional evidence to test this hypothesis is that I don't remember the last time there was a hurricane or an earthquake here.
Don't speak too loud. Don't speak too loud. I think Malaysia's blessed, right? They don't seem to get hit by the huge hurricanes. They don't seem to be hit by earthquakes. But if you look at the map, you have Malaysia Peninsula here. I should say this way. And then next to it, you've got Indonesia. And Indonesia, there's a caldera. It's a huge lake. It's right by us. So when we feel the earthquakes, it's usually because they struck in Indonesia and it's traveled over. So I won't say it will never happen. I will just say we are blessed we haven't had it so far.
Thank you for the clarification. Very much. Because I remember it was a Friday, we were in class, and then all of a sudden we began to feel like, oh, what is going on? Did I drink too much coffee? It was one of the classes with one of the MIT professors. And then I was on the 10th floor because we were through Zoom, and then our friends were like literally trying to get out because the elevator was not working, and it was like, wait a second, it's gonna pass, and that was it. But it was only the shake.
Yeah, there was no damage.
Yeah. Now, given that we have discussed many things through your journey, I need to ask you, across all these, there were decisions.
Yes.
And across these decisions, there were compromises. So, can you tell us which was the most challenging compromise that you faced?
That's actually a very good question. I'm sure that there were compromises, but I didn't view them as compromises. To me, I just viewed it as a path. So, but I would say the biggest challenge that I encountered was being here during COVID, and my mother got sick and passed away in the U.S.
Okay.
And so the lack of traveling at that point in time, because I didn't realize how sick she was till the last 6 weeks. So I would say there's compromise of family being further away, but I wouldn't call it compromise. You're right, there are choices, the trade-offs. But no matter where you are in life, there's always trade-offs. When you pursue one path, you close off another path.
Yes.
It doesn't matter where.
That's right. When you make a decision, it's like you are on the crossover of two different worlds. And once you make the decision, then it's like you have to live with it. Otherwise, you cannot change the decision. It's like that was done way before. That world was created then.
True, but when you think through decisions that you make, if you make the wrong decisions, there's very little in life you can't unwind, right? You make a wrong career choice, you can come back to school, you can reset, right? Even if you're older, you can still come back, reset, find a different path, right? Or you can start your own business as an entrepreneur. You make the wrong choice personally, if you're wrong marriage, there's ways to exit out of it, right? And to my knowledge, the only thing you can't exit out of is once you commit to a kid. Everything else, you can roll back, you can reverse. Maybe you don't reverse it the same way you want. You don't go back to point zero. But you can create paths. For me, I've been lucky because I don't think there are things that you can always regret in life. But there's very little that I would want to roll back and really change.
That's an statement.
And what I do wish to roll back and really change happened when I was really young. So.
That's something that you can live with.
Not all things are choices to live with, but yes, you have to live with.
That's right. Now, there are going to be a lot of people, there are going to be a lot of young people as well. Among them, there are going to be some young Julianas also watching this. So, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I think the piece of advice I would give to my younger self is go explore more. Stop being timid and go. Because the more you explore, the more you see, the more your world changes. And the more what you want becomes clearer as well. Because who I was when I was younger, a lot of decisions that I was coached into by my parents who had the best intent in mind. But when I finally saw more and became more sure of myself, I knew exactly what I wanted. And it was easier to obtain.
That's so beautiful. It's like I cannot find a better way to end the episode. How people can find you?
I'm easy to find. Come and find me on LinkedIn.
Juliana, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for
I
inviting
really
me.
enjoy doing this. And for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye.
Bye.